Cook Well video number 4. Today we're going to be making East Indian mung bean stew, which is called khichdi. And it's wonderful because it's a one-pot meal, with your grain and your beans and all these wonderful vegetables and some olive oil. I'm actually adding a sea vegetable today, so this is my introduction to you to adding sea veggies to your diet. And sea veggies are so important for us in the fact that they have a lot of trace minerals in them. Vegetables on the land have what's called major minerals, and then ocean veggies, with all the silt that runs from the land into the ocean, all the veggies growing right off the coast, are usually rich in a lot of trace minerals, which are so important for so many functions of the body. And they believe that people in the Orient and in Asian countries live so long because of the sea veggies in their diet, and also the fish. So the ocean is a wonderful bounty for us. And the easiest way to add some sea veggies into your diet is with something called dulse. And this dulse here I got from my natural food store in the form of dulse flakes. So if you get it not processed like this, it'll look sort of like crumpled up tissue paper. It'll be like, purplish, dark purple red crumpled up tissue paper, and it's a sort of an easy sea veggie to incorporate because it doesn't have like a real strong oceany flavor. So you can sprinkle dulse in at the end of a meal. You don't have to, most sea veggies you have to soak first. So this one and another one called arame are two that you can add to the top of a stir fry or your pot of beans at the end. You don't have to prep it a lot and soak it, rehydrate it, and cook it into the meal. But in future videos we'll use all the different sea veggies so you can see how it's done. But this is a real easy one to incorporate at the end for trace minerals, dulse and arame. I want to talk a little bit, I think I want to make the khichdi. I want to talk a little bit about the process I used to get it to this point, so you know. But I'll basically give you the recipe. If you want to make a pot this big that would serve about 12 people with leftovers, you can reduce it, cut it in half for maybe if you don't want to make that much. But I used 3 cups dry mung beans and 2 cups any kind of brown rice you want. It calls for brown basmati. I think that's the classic Indian rice that they use, but I chose short grain brown. But you could use jasmine rice, or you could even use millet or amaranth, are 2 other grains that take about 30 minutes to cook, that you can combine with the mung beans and soak overnight the day before and cook them together in the same pot. So brown rice is brown rice is perfect for that because it takes 40 minutes and the mung beans take 40 minutes. But if you have a grain like millet or amaranth that takes only 30, it's not going to fall apart and disintegrate and become gooey or anything weird in texture if you cook it a little bit longer in there with it. So you can vary the grains you have. But you basically soak your grain and your mung beans the night before in the pot you're going to cook it in, under 4 or 5 inches of water, so that as those mung beans swell overnight and sprout and become alive, they're still underwater in the morning after. Those mung beans will swell to about twice their size. The grain doesn't swell very much at all. So the next day, I poured the water off and basically rinsed that old soak water off of the beans and rice, and then added fresh water to about 3 inches above the level of the grain and beans in there, so that as it came to a boil, I was able to skim some foam off the top and take it down to simmer and let it boil for about 20 minutes. The whole cooking time for the grains and the bean is 40 minutes, but at the point in time after it's done cooking 20 minutes, you add an herb called epazote. It's from, I believe, it's from the Mexican tradition, and I don't know where it grows, but this herb here was foreign to me until I started making khichdi, and it's known for decreasing the flatulogenic factor of beans. So it helps improve the digestibility of beans. And mung beans are so easy to digest anyway. This is going to be very easy to digest with this in it. So I added about a tablespoon of epazote at the 20-minute point. And that's been cooking in there for about 20 minutes right now. And I stirred in, so after I let that epazote cook in there about maybe 15 minutes, I added 2 bay leaves. You want bay leaves to cook in about 10 minutes along with our ground spices. So what I'm going to do now is add about a tablespoon of ginger and a tablespoon of cumin and a teaspoon each of coriander and turmeric. Ginger, cumin, so heavy on the ginger and the cumin. I'll just do like a level teaspoon of these guys. Coriander and turmeric. At this point in time, I will also add my vegetables that are pretty dense. They'll take about 10 minutes to really soften a bit and cook into there. So I'm going to stir my spices in, and then I'm going to stir in my carrots. And after a couple of minutes of carrots cooking, I'm going to add my broccoli and zucchini and garlic. And then more toward the end, I'll be adding the leafy spices, which would be fresh cilantro and parsley, and my salt and my olive oil and my dulse flakes. So it's going to be really great. The people helping me make this video are all going to get to feast afterwards. So I love the color. The turmeric imparts this nice golden color to your cooking. I wanted to read a little bit about sea vegetables and their bounty of wonderment for the body and mind and spirit. They're so balancing to us and healing. They're the ocean's mineral and vitamin bank. So rich they surpass any food on earth for diversity of nutrients. High in calcium and iron, they also provide B vitamins, including B12, vitamin A, potassium, magnesium, phosphorus, and iodine. And dulse is particularly high in iodine. That purple color, any foods that have that purple color are high in iodine, like beets and dulse. And I think there was one more, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But I learned that you need food state minerals in your diet through varying all the colors. Okay, so it says also, they're an underwater treasure chest of valuable trace minerals: selenium, zinc, copper, nickel, molybdenum. And I talked about that, how the silt washes into the land. They're very alkalizing to the system, to the pH, which we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in a minute, on how to alkalize your pH through your diet. But so sea veggies are very alkalizing, and they help to balance an over-acidic blood condition. So if you're eating a lot of foods that cause an acid blood condition and you want to thwart disease by keeping your pH alkaline, sea veggies are a great food to incorporate for that. They contain alginic acid, which binds and expels radioactive substances from the body, and heavy metals too. So they help cleanse us as well. Seaweeds also have a calming and soothing effect on the inner sea of emotions. When eaten in small quantities over a period of several months, they can help to calm hyperactive kids, soften and relax rigid attitudes, and enable you to stand up under pressure with ease. There's so many varieties, and each are intriguingly different. The reason why I love this book is because she ties in moods and emotions and mental states to food, not just the nutrient benefits for the body, but she's really looking at it holistically. So she goes over in this chapter on sea vegetables. She has a different sea vegetable highlighted for each page. So it's wonderful. Agar is sort of like a thickening agent you can use that's derived from sea vegetable. Arame, there's one that's very easy to add to cooking because it doesn't have a strong oceany flavor, just like dulse, and you can add it to the end dry. You don't have to soak it first. Hijiki, very strong sea vegetable. This is very interesting. Richest of all the seaweeds in calcium and iron, a good choice when you need to be able to stand up under pressure. It's known as the bearer of wealth and beauty. Hijiki is traditionally used to strengthen the bones, revitalize skin and hair, and build strong intestines. And kombu softens beans and makes them more digestible. Contains glutamic acid, the tenderizer and flavor enhancer. Nori is a good source of protein and vitamin A. This is just wonderful. I like this one, wakame, the woman's seaweed. Graceful green fronds with a subtly sweet flavor and slippery texture. It expands quite a bit, so you do need to soak it and cut it into small pieces. It's high in calcium, thiamine, niacin, vitamin B12. Traditionally used in Oriental medicine to purify the blood, strengthen intestines, skin, and hair. It's beneficial for the reproductive organs and to help regulate women's menstrual cycles. So, amazing, the healing natures of all these wonderful foods. Again, I highly recommend the Self-Healing Cookbook by Christina Turner. So now that our carrots have had a chance to cook in there for just a couple of minutes because they're the most dense, they take the longest time to release their flavors, just like those ground spices. I always put my carrots and root veggies in with the ground spices, the cumin, the turmeric, the coriander. So what I'm going to do now is add our medium dense veggies, which will be the broccoli and the zucchini. And you can use any veggies you want in this. You could use green beans, bok choy, cabbage, whatever is best, you know, for your palate. Kitchery comes out different for everyone. And I'm putting these the greens from the broccoli too in there. It's interesting here. Our light above me keeps turning on and turning off, and we haven't quite figured out how to make it just stay on or just turn off. So it's doing what it wants to do here. I wonder if I can fit more in there, because all I really have to stir in next is our garlic, which doesn't take up a lot of space. And these leafy herbs just wilt right down, so they don't take up much space at all. Yeah, I think I can fit more broccoli in there. I'm gonna do it. Wonder if I can fit it all. Do you think I can? I think I can. It'll shrink a little bit, not too much. This takes talent. Oh, this smells so good. I wish you could smell this. So the thing I wanted to talk about when I mentioned sea veggies was pH. In the body, the ideal pH is 80% alkaline, 20% acid. And the foods which help keep us at that nice alkaline, mostly alkaline blood condition are whole foods and sort of greens and foods more on the salty side with whole sea salt, not refined salt. Foods which cause an acidic blood condition would be alcohol, chocolate, coffee, and refined sugar. And anything, even fruits that are real sweet, can really swing the pH more toward acid. So fruit is to a minimum and in balance with whole grains and in your diet, not in the same meal, because we're not we don't want to food combine to make difficult digestion, which we'll talk about in another video. But we want to really limit those foods, or make it so that those foods comprise maybe like 5 or 7% of the diet, you know, but mostly we're revolving around whole grains, beans, and vegetables. And so also they say meat and dairy products and eggs, any animal products also can swing the pH more toward acidic, especially if they're raised commercially and with a lot of chemicals. Of course, chemicals are definitely in foods, like nitrates and preserved meats, lunch meats, and packaged foods definitely cause an acidic blood condition. And in an acid state, disease can set in real easily. Yeasts take over. You want to keep your pH more toward 80% alkaline, 20% acid. And they say brown rice has that pH balance, the ideal body's pH. So brown rice is a good staple to have in the diet for that. So remember, your dark leafy greens and your salads and your grains. This is looking great. I got all the veggies in there. And the last thing for our kitchery is our dulse flakes. So I'm going to grab these, just maybe a medium-sized handful of our dulse flakes, just to give it some trace minerals. Doesn't that look wonderful? And I'll do a little sea salt at this time too. I'll do maybe a teaspoon of sea salt. Because this is a big pot, I did a heaping teaspoon. Yeah, heaping teaspoon and a half. And then I'll taste it and see if I need to add more. As always. But the dulse imparts a little bit of a salty flavor. So, you know, dulse flakes and lemon are a great way to substitute salt in your cooking. If you really like that salty flavor, but your doctor tells you can't have any salt, dulse flakes and lemon juice, I've found, are wonderful for people. So I'm taking this off the heat after I've added our sea salt. We're basically at the end of our kitchery here. So we're taking it off the heat and adding our herbs and our fat, which will be some olive oil. And you can do as much olive oil as is good for you. So in the summertime, they say less oils and meats, so because they impart warmth to the body. So it is summertime where we're at. So we're going to use maybe this is not, I'll measure it like this with this teaspoon. I'll do maybe 3 to 5 teaspoons. This is a huge pot, by the way, so. But that, you know, the oils gives it a kind of a stick to your ribs quality. So if your cooking is too light in the fats, or don't have any, you're gonna feel hungry again in an hour. So as I'm adding, so everything's off the heat, and I just added our oil and our sea salt. And now I'm gonna add our leafy herbs, which is cilantro and parsley chopped, fresh cilantro and fresh parsley chopped up. This is wonderful. Ooh, I think I can stir that in there. I hope I can. Yeah. It just wilts right down. I wanted to talk about sea salt versus commercial salt. And I might have talked about this a little bit in the first video, but I want to repeat it, that Refined salt, so iodized salt, it's also called sodium chloride, is horrible for the body. That is what causes blood pressure issues for people. But the whole sea salt, with all the other trace minerals with it, as nature intended, is a necessary thing for the body that helps alkalize and balance systems. And salt is so valuable to us. It helps for our hydration and other functions of the body. But salt used to be a form of currency back, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, because it is so important for the body. And back then, of course, it was unrefined. It was sea salt. So when you're shopping for salt and the label says sea salt, but it's a white product, be aware that most sea salts are off color. So you want to get ones that are like the Himalayan, the Celtic, the Portuguese. From Utah, there's a good salt available at Trader Joe's called Real Salt, and that's a wonderful brand from Utah. And I don't know where they mine it from, but I know it's got good trace minerals in it. It can be a little confusing, but you want to look at it and see if it's a little gray or a little pink or a little brown or it's got speckles in it. That's a good thing. That means there's other trace minerals in there with it. So, and if it's a little bit wet and sticks together, that's also a very good thing. That's indicative of a true whole sea salt instead of a sea salt that's been fairly refined and labeled sea salt. So there's both out there. I wanted to give you a few different herb spice combinations for seasoning. And so you have the one for the kitchery here. Remember, the ground spices you need to cook in for about 7 to 10 minutes. And then the leafy ones you put at the very end. They need less than a minute to release their flavors. If you overcook the leafy herbs, they lose their flavor. So other good flavors together are chipotle, cumin, and cayenne with sage. Very good. So you put, in a pot like this maybe, you'd put maybe a heaping tablespoon of chipotle, a heaping tablespoon of cumin, and maybe a 1/16 of a teaspoon of cayenne. Cayenne's super potent. You cook those in for 10 minutes or so, and then add some ground or fresh sage at the very end. And you can even go with other leafy herbs. See, leafy herbs that are cooling, like cilantro and dill, are wonderful for spicy concoctions, like the ones that have the cayenne and the ginger and the curry flavors. The cooling leafy herbs help balance all that heat and make for a wonderful flavor combination. Oh, here's our light again. And the process of choosing your spices is going to get easier and easier. It's never that the food, it will be inedible. It's just that certain combinations really set each other off, and you'll discover those over time by smelling the herb and spices before you use them. Like if you know that you basically want the medicinal value of turmeric and ginger in your pot of beans or your stir fry or your soup, you can then take your leafy ones off the shelf as you're cooking and smell them and see if the flavors marry through the smell. That's what I do. And I've come up with some good combinations over the years. So there's your first one. Another really great one I use all the time is a yellow curry powder. And that's cooked for about 7 to 10 minutes. And then at the end, I'll do any one or all three of these 3 herbs: dill, tarragon, and rosemary. They go great with just coriander and ginger or just yellow curry. Okay, so here's another one, and we did this with the stir fry in video number 1, and that's ginger and coriander cooked for 7 to 10 minutes with dill, tarragon, or rosemary at the very end. And then if you want sweeter spices for dishes like yams or winter squash, cinnamon and nutmeg and coriander and ginger, any one of those 4 they're wonderful all together or just by themselves. A leafy spice that doesn't interfere too much, I've found, with those 4 would be parsley. parsley's really pretty mild, but it does have its own flavor, but it kind of combines with all the other spices real well. So if you want to add a leafy herb at the end for color and you don't know which one to use, choose parsley because it kind of goes with everything. So we talked about sea veggies and pH and herb spice combinations. The last thing I want to talk about is metabolic typing. There's a diet from the late 80s, early 90s, the Zone diet, where they said that the best ratio of carbohydrates to fats to proteins was something like 40, 30, 30. And what they're finding now is that everybody needs a different, and another thing with that was that every time you put something in your mouth, snack or meal, it should be that ratio. And they called it your fuel mixture ratio, that your body recognized it as a fuel it could efficiently use if it had the fats and the protein with it, and it wasn't just a solitary bagel or a muffin or something. You want to have the almonds with it. So that's where that idea comes from, but what they're finding is that everybody needs a different ratio. And I help people figure out, based on their blood type, what ratio that is. So I'll give you an example. Blood type A is the ideal vegetarian, and blood typing works for only about 50% of everyone because there's so many other overriding factors. But if it does work for you, it tends to boost your energy levels because it's like you're getting the types of foods and in that ratio that your body recognizes and can use most efficiently. You know, your energy level goes way up. So using mostly a carbohydrate diet for type A blood type, because A stems from when we were agrarian and farming, your plate might be 60 or 70% complex carbohydrates in the form of rice or another whole grain, or even potatoes or something, if you like those. But then maybe, so we have 40% left, so then maybe it would be 30% protein, 10% fat, right? And then, so for type O, who is from the ancestry of hunting and eating meat, it's the oldest blood type, their plate might be 60% protein, animal protein particularly, and then 20% carbohydrates and 20% fat. So I encourage people to to experiment with that and see what works best for them, and maybe eat a certain way with the types of foods you think are best for you based on your ancestry and your sort of your body constitution. It's really good to look into with Ayurveda, your constitution. There's 3 different general body types, and we're all a combination of 2 of them. But it's good to figure out what types of foods and eat them in a certain ratio of fats to carbs to protein consistently for 10 days or 2 weeks, and see where your energy level is after that, and then adjust it a little bit and see where your energy is after that. And you'll find that certain combinations and ratios really boost your energy level. So it's worth experimenting with. And I think that's it for video number 4. So I hope you got everything out of this, and if you have any questions, that you can give me a call for consultations on the phone. So my number is 805-547-9073. Thanks.